When was the last time you thought about giving up? Maybe you feel like quitting right now. Hi, I'm Shannon Lenz, your spiritual fitness coach. No matter what you're facing, if you are weary and considering throwing in the towel, know that you are not alone. Throughout the course of history, and even today, God's people have had to endure trials and hardships, and sometimes they've wanted to give up. For example, the book of Exodus gives the account of Moses leading God's people, the Israelites, out of slavery in Egypt. In Exodus 3:7-8, the Lord said to Moses from a burning bush, "I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey." As we continue to read the Exodus account, we see that God made good on his promise to deliver them out of the hands of the Egyptians. He demonstrated his power and might by striking the Egyptians with 10 terrible plagues. After the deaths of all their firstborn, the Egyptians were eager to get rid of the Israelites, and Pharaoh let God's people go, at least at first. He ended up regretting his decision to let them leave and chased them to the Red Sea. But God wasn't done showing his awesome power. He parted the Red Sea, and all of the Israelites crossed over on dry land. But when the Egyptian soldiers and chariots tried to follow, the sea crashed down over them, and they drowned. After reading this account, you may be tempted to think, after everything they've seen God do, after they've seen God's mighty power and how faithful he is to keep his promises, the Israelites will never doubt, they'll never despair, and they'll walk confidently into the promised land. But that isn't what happened. As we read on, we see that the journey to the promised land was hard. In Exodus 16:3, the people grumbled to Moses, saying, "Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." In other words, they didn't want to endure the hardship. They didn't want to keep going on this journey. They wanted to give up. From our perspective, I think it's easy for us to judge them harshly for their lack of faith and perseverance. After all they'd seen, they should have known to keep putting one foot in front of the other, trusting in God to sustain them and to deliver on the second aspect of his promise to them. He'd already delivered them from slavery. Now, he would bring them to the promised land. You know, God made us promises too. First, he promised to deliver us from the slavery of sin and death, and he delivered on that promise already. He sent his son Jesus, who repeatedly showed us God's mighty power through his signs and miracles. Then, Christ set us free through his death and resurrection. Now, he's promised to lead us to our promised land, the new heaven and the new earth. Revelation 21:3-4 describes the place of our eternal hope. "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away." So, how can we persevere when the journey to our promised land gets too hard? By remembering God's promises to us and his faithfulness to keep those promises thus far. Then we have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, trusting God to deliver on the second aspect of his promise to us. He will lead us to the promised land. Here's my challenge for you today. Prayerfully consider all God has done for you so far. Write it down. Then think about what God has promised in the end to those who trust in Him. Ask God for the strength to persevere, even though the journey is hard. Then put one foot in front of the other and go win today.